Zach Laws of Gold Derby here with Loren Weeks. He's the production designer of Apple TV Plus's new series, Dickinson. And Loren, I mean, this is a show that a lot of people are still starting to discover. You know, Apple TV is obviously in its infancy. So I just want to start by asking you, just talk a little bit about the show in general, and as a production designer, what was appealing to you about being a part of it?
Well, the show in general is about Emily Dickinson, her early life. I think when we pick her up, she's in her late teens. And to me, it's an exploration and a celebration of the creative spirit. She was way ahead of her time, I think. And, it just was really intriguing. What intrigued me about it was, one, that it was a period piece, because I had not worked on a period piece before. But this was clearly, after reading the first script, episode 1, it was clear it was not going to be, Downton Abbey. So it was very different and very fresh.
Well, explain a little bit just how it is, those ways that it's not your typical period piece show. I mean, because it's a really interesting approach that the creator, Alina Smith, takes to this material. So just dive a little bit into that more.
Well, I think primarily is that our Emily, her siblings and her peers have very contemporary perspectives on life and attitudes. Their dialogue is very contemporary. It's contrasted against a period backdrop. All the adults speak in a very period sort of formality. So, I just think it allowed for a lot of exploration and sort of riffing on the period versus the contemporary time and how it's very different, but at the same time, a lot of similarities.
We'll talk a bit more, if you will, just about how in terms of how it affected your own work, like in terms of what your general designs turned out to be. Did you feel like a bit more creative freedom to not necessarily like follow period specificities?
Well, we wanted to be true, kind of honest to the time period. This was a discussion I had early with Elena, actually in the interview, because I wasn't sure how anachronistic she wanted to be. Clearly the dialogue is, but I didn't know if she wanted to go that way with set design or not. And she didn't. She wanted to be period accurate. So a lot of what we did a lot of research. We found a lot of vendors who still create wallpapers that were available in that time period. Carpeting. The carpeting we got is by weavers who still make it the same way with the same patterns. But we decided, I early on decided I didn't want to be beholden to that time period. We weren't doing a documentary. So I think, most of my experience with Victorian era decor is either comes from visiting historical museums, such as Emily Dickinson's house and the room that was her bedroom, or it comes from maybe B&Bs. So I found that a lot of times the patterns and the colors were just jarring and fought against each other, and I decided I would bring a more contemporary sensibility, I think, to how those patterns and colors were combined and responded to one another.
That's interesting. I mean, talk a little more about what did you settle on in terms of a color scheme and a pattern scheme that would best represent the attitude of the show?
Ask me that one again.
In terms of, you said you wanted it to have kind of a unified color and pattern scheme. So I'm just wondering if you could talk about how you decided what that would be.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, the way I approach any design, there's always something you find that for me, that I'll hang my hat on. It may be a wallpaper, it may be a painting even that just sort of strikes my fancy. But I think with this, we're wanting to keep, as I said, period accurate for the most part. So it's a matter of finding what wallpapers, what companies still existed that created this, what patterns they offered. And then a lot of times we started with the wallpaper because the Victorians in that time period wallpapered a lot. It was cheaper than painting. So they might wallpaper every year and do something different. So we started with the wallpapers, found some patterns that intrigued us. A lot of it was just getting our head around those patterns because they're nothing like anything I would pick for myself or use. So it's a matter of sort of taking a leap of faith with these patterns and then building the colors and the carpeting around that the way I would any sort of contemporary interior design, where you pick colors and fabrics and you're trying to blend them together and make them work and support each other.
Mm-hmm. In terms of designing Emily Dickinson's room, just dive into that a little bit more.
Well, we visited the Emily Dickinson Museum in Amherst, Mass., which is the house she for the most part grew up in. And they have fully restored her bedroom. But the wallpaper they used there, from what we were told, was really from her later life. So we decided we didn't want to pick that. It didn't need to pick that wallpaper or try to match that wallpaper. But we picked something of a similar nature. I wanted to bring in a sense of the outdoors, of springtime in her room. The wallpaper we picked was a floral pattern. The color we picked for the wood trim and all is I think it was a period paint through California Paints. I think it was called I'm drawing a blank, something apple. But I just wanted to really, because Emily loved the outdoors, she loved plants, she was a gardener, she had a lot of exotic plants, and I wanted to bring that into her bedroom.
Right. In terms of like how that, did you try to make like a conscious effort to distinguish that from how the rest of the town would look?
The rest of the town, we didn't get in that much to the rest of the town. We saw very little of the, most of our town work was exterior. But I did
say most of the other sets, I mean, yeah.
Well, yeah, from the other rooms in her house.
Right, yeah.
We actually, I felt strongly about giving each room in that house an identity. So I do think that Emily's has a certain feel to it. Her parents had a certain feel. Her father's office, the parlor, the dining room. I think when you watch the show, you'll see that each one is real, I think, very distinctive and strong.
Mm-hmm. And all that comes from character based, right?
Yeah. Edward was I think, quintessential sort of man of the house at the time, and it's a very patriarchal society. He was a lawyer and held public office in Amherst, and in our storyline and in real life, he won an election to Congress. So we wanted him to feel scholarly and educated, very masculine feel to it. The parlor was her mother's domain, so that comes off more feminine. And then in the dining room, we felt like this was a place where Edward would entertain a lot and speak a lot about his ambitions. And the wallpaper we had in there was from a French company, Zuber, you'll have to forgive my pronunciation, which that company dates back to the 18th century. And the wallpaper we have in that room is called Views of North America. It was designed by Zuber as a homage to the Young Republic, and shows 5 different natural wonders of America, such as San Francisco Harbor, Niagara Falls, and we felt it was very aspirational for Edward. It was maybe stretching credibility a little bit, although the paper did exist at that time, but we felt it was really appropriate and gives a real presence to that room.
Mm-hmm. So obviously you worked on all this with Elena Smith, the creator. You also worked on the pilot, which is where you establish the general look of the show with David Gordon Green, who's of course a well-known movie director and has directed quite a few television shows as well. So what was that collaboration like between the three of you?
That was a good collaboration. It was a little bit, sometimes Elena had one thing in mind and David had something else in mind and I had something else in mind. But ultimately we were all trying to just create the best show and, the best look for the show. David's really out there. I love working with David. He has some really inspired ideas. Elena was very clear where she wanted the show to go. So, we found our way, as you do on any show. You throw out ideas, you talk about it. Sometimes they land, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they change along the way.
I think that it's so interesting that the three of you came together to work on the show, because looking at your respective filmographies, you guys do a lot of contemporary work as opposed to period work. So I think, did that kind of, I guess, help give this show a different feeling from, the usual kind of Downton Abbey type program?
Yeah, maybe. Like I said, early on I felt like I wanted to be true and honest to the period, but not beholden to it. So we did introduce some contemporary wallpapers, contemporary paint colors, contemporary fabrics. They are sprinkled in there. We felt they were appropriate and worked with the set, and that's what we did. Yeah. And I also tried to bring in certain areas. Particularly like in her dreams and fantasies, which we explore, modern concepts. In episode 3, there's a dance. The parents have gone and the kids throw a party, and I wanted to introduce a sort of a period version of a disco ball. So we took and David Tim Orr, who is our cinematographer, indulged me in that. I don't know if you know those. They're called Christmas pyramids. I think they're a German. And they're a rotor, a wood propeller that's with candles below that will turn the rotor. And quite often they can be quite tall. So we took one of those and added little bits of broken mirror to it and candles to try to suggest the disco ball, which David did embrace and adds a little bit of changing light in the background. Okay.
Yeah, that's very. I never thought we would ever talk about a disco ball in relation to Emily Dickinson. There you go. So what are you working on now?
Another Apple project. It's untitled. The show creator is Simon Kinberg and David Weil, and it's a big science fiction project.
Okay. Well, I certainly look forward to seeing that. Loren, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on your work.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.